Hey there, Jordan with Status Coup. It is night 2 of the People's Mic and day 3 of the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where they are putting on some of the best theater, better than Broadway, if you ask me, in America. We have another mega show, and a lot is going on. Last night was awesome. We had Nina Turner last night. We had Nina Turner, Marianne Williamson, among others. Tonight, we're going to shift focus a little bit, focus on third parties, focus on building independent movements. We're also going to start, because there's a ton of news about the election that we need to get to. So I'm really excited about the guest lineup tonight. Buckle up, because we got great guests. Starting with, we're going to have Steve Grumbine and Ben Burgis to talk about all the moving parts. Did you know RFK Jr. might be dropping out this week and supporting Trump? Did you know, I just broke today, that the Democrats are putting on a full court press to get Cornel West to drop out, including offering him a position in the Harris administration. Cornel says, I ain't that type of brother. He's not doing it. We also are going to focus on, there seems to be a bit of a disappearing attempt. The Democrats are trying to basically block out that there are, I believe, when it's all said and done, tens of thousands of protesters outside protesting to stop a genocide. They're kind of just, hiding that fact. So we're going to get into that. Also going to have really great guests on topics that, frankly, the Democratic Convention is not going to cover. Indigenous rights, Native American rights. We're also going to be talking about environmental genocide. So we're going to have Winona LaDuke, amazing Native American activist. Going to have Stephen Donziger, human rights activist. He was wrongfully under house arrest and then federal prison for 3 years for the crime of successfully going after Chevron. We're going to have Kshama Sawant, former socialist. She's still a socialist. Former Seattle City Council member, now with Workers Strike Back. And to wrap the show later, we're going to have Jill Stein, Green Party nominee. Also believe we're going to have Jodie Evans, if her Uber agrees to drop her off in the right place. Jodie Evans, co-founder Code Pink. So a lot of guests to get to. Remember, we're doing this show to kind of show reality versus the BS theater they're putting on in the United Center. We need your support. We've been on the ground in Chicago all week. John Farina went live last night. We had 7,000 people watching live. Unfortunately, it was a disgusting picture of cops beating protesters, tasing protesters. We got it all. John was just live again before this broadcast, and he might be going again later tonight. So if you actually want more independent, all caps, independent, on-the-ground reporting and shows like this, we could only do it through you. Support us, statuscoup.com/join. We got 25 new paying members yesterday. Our goal is 300 this week, so we got to do some work, folks. If you value this kind of reporting, both on the ground and in the studio, please sign up. 16 cents a day. That's all I'm asking. 16 cents a day is what $5 a month comes out to. Joining me now, great duo, Ben Burgis. He is a Jacobin columnist and host of Give Them an Argument on YouTube, and returning champion Steve Grumbine, co-founder of Real Progressives, MMT scholar. I wanted to have you guys on to talk about a lot of the news going on, both with that disappearing act, where the Democrats are trying to basically block out the protests against genocide, but also some of the moving parts with the news. Before I get to questions, let me start with Bernie talking at the DNC yesterday.
3.5 years working together, we have accomplished more than any government since FDR. But much more remains to be done. We must summon the courage to stand up to wealth and power and deliver justice for people at home and abroad. abroad. We must end this horrific war in Gaza. Bring home the hostages and demand an immediate ceasefire. Slashed by up to 65%. At home right here, we must take on big pharma, big oil, big ag, big tech, and all the other.
So that was Bernard. I love how he said abroad. I also want to play real quick. Stick with me. This was Monday night during President Biden's speech. They seem to want to hide this protest. Zai, that's the video in the tweet.
Possibility. We're in the grip of a once-in-a-century pandemic. Historic joblessness. Calls for racial justice long overdue.
So for those that don't know, that was members of the Florida delegation. They had a sign to stop funding Israel. There was some bouncer-looking dude behind them trying to yank it from them. And then the producers there dimmed the lights on that section. So if you're having PTSD, Bernie, people from the 2016 convention in Philly, I feel you. So I don't know, Ben, you are, you know your history. There's a lot of talk about 1968. Obviously, the craziness and the brutality that went on there in Chicago at the DNC. But I kind of sense that it's always kind of an alternate reality, these conventions, compared to like what's going on. But the vibes might feel good, but I sense that this is still a major issue that might deprive Kamala Harris of a potential victory.
Oh, absolutely. It could still deprive her of a victory. I mean, nothing has changed. I mean, what's changed is that the fundamentals of the election are looking better for her than they were for Biden, you know, a couple of months ago. That's true, right? But it could still absolutely end up being a very tight election, consistent with the polling right now. And, you know, the sort of basic thing a lot of us have been trying to scream from the rooftops for months that look, if it's a tight election and, you know, in crucial states like Michigan, I mean, way more people voted uncommitted than the margins that Biden won by in 2020, or in Michigan is the state that I know the best because that's where I'm from, that you know, that Trump won by in 2016, right? So if, you know, it could absolutely still tank them. I mean, right now, it just seems like they're kind of hoping that people are going to stop thinking about it and talking about it. But I don't, you know, I mean, look, I'm not saying you know, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not saying they couldn't still win anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think they could definitely lose because of this, and it would, you know, have no one to blame themselves.
And Steve, I told you to be on your best behavior, but I'm gonna let you rant here, because I kind of stopped myself even when I asked that question. Yeah, this is about the election and elections matter, but this is more important than the election. Like, the people in that audience are, you know, having a ball. Michelle Obama gave a barn burner. Obama gave a barn burner. But there seems to be a cognitive dissonance going on. Yeah, that's sad what's going on, but like, there's an active ongoing genocide going on. And really all we're getting from Vice President Harris is, you know, starker crocodile tears.
Yeah, I look at this and I say to myself, I'm 55 years old, and in my time on this earth, I've never experienced a more brutal, direct, videotaped, in-your-face slaughter of people ever in my life. It has fundamentally changed me, and I tend to be on the edge. You know, I'm over here on the left, and I'm not caving in So that was already a given. But seeing this, it's taken the politics completely out of it for me. I don't want to hear about what election's going on. I want to, when I saw that girl, and I mean, believe me, it's not just an emotional thing. I'm a father, right? And when I saw that girl with her jaw hanging off, and I thought to myself, if that were my son, what would I do? And we talk about terrorism and we talk about terrorists. We're creating them by the dozens, by the thousands. And we're creating people that genuinely want freedom, that don't want to be slaughtered. I don't care about this election. All I care about is ending that murder, ending that genocide. Let's call it what it is. And when I see people playing politics, when I see people trying to tell me to be practical, harkens back to 2016, 2020, all the we must be practical, now is not the time. You know, Green New Deal, all that stuff was a totally different ball of cheese. This right here is a systematic slaughter that we're funding, fully funding. And when I see a Democrat grabbing the sign, it tells me all I need to know about the morals and the direction of that party. It tells me everything I need to know about this election. They're not concerned with it. They're not concerned with it. And quite frankly, every time I think about it, all I can envisage is really, I have no power here. Voting, great, wonderful. How do you stop this thing? You saw campuses across the country filled with students, teachers risking tenure, risking their careers, people literally sitting there fighting back and getting bludgeoned by cops. And you saw it last night in your footage, bludgeoned by cops. If we are not already in a fascist state, I don't know what one is. And by the way, save what democracy? When I see stuff like this, when I see the people screaming out and saying, stop this now. And I say to myself, the vote is only one little teeny piece of what a democracy represents. They know what the people want. They know what we're saying. They know, and they're still denying it. They're erasing it. So to me, the election itself is just not even important. I don't even care about it.
Hey, Ben, you know, I want to read this tweet because I think it's not just about, I mean, obviously it's about the genocide, but it's also, not only are they trying to block out the protests inside, but they seem to have quite the different standard for who gets to go on the stage. They had hostages on, they had families of Israeli hostages on yesterday, but as Uncommitted tweeted out, and let me read that tweet, this is from the Uncommitted movement, uncommitted delegates urged the Democratic Party to reject the hierarchy of human value by ensuring Palestinian voices are heard on the main stage. We are learning that Israeli hostages' families will be speaking from the main stage. We strongly support that decision and also strongly hope that we will also be hearing from Palestinians who have endured the largest civilian deaths toll since 1948. I got to tell you, Ben, they could talk about democracy till they're blue in the face, but we know that the donors are in the boxes up there in the VIP suites, and a lot of those donors do not want Palestinian voices on the main stage. Can you elaborate? I mean, why wouldn't they at the very least try and make it appear that they care by allowing those doctors who wanted to speak, doctors who have witnessed this genocide on stage, or, you know, members of the Uncommitted movement?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that calculation works out well for them, right? Because, you know, yeah, I guess they get whatever bonus they get from, you know, pretending to care. And look, what to echo, right? Steve said about feeling a little gross, even like framing all of this in those terms, right? But those are the terms of the question, so roll with it, right? But look, I think that the reality of it, right, is so overwhelming that you really can't let that on the stage at all, right? You know, without reminding people of something that they absolutely don't want people to remind them of. I mean, like, even aside from the donors, I think that it's just, you know, the last thing you want to do if you're trying to excite people about going out to vote for Kamala Harris is to get, you know, is to remind them that there's these horrors going on that, you know, have been going on for the last, you know, 10 months in the Biden-Harris administration, that, you know, she's made pretty clear, you know, she has no plans on stopping, right? You know, that, like she said, you know, the party line is that, you know, she's very sad and she, you know, she wants a ceasefire, but her national security advisor also said that, you know, she's not open at all to cutting off the supply of weapons.
Right. Absolutely. I want to shift to some of the news. Obviously, it is the DNC, but there's massive election news. This was kind of hinted at, Ben, but RFK, there's reports now that he's expected to drop out. Shocker, plans to endorse Trump. Different pundits have different opinions, but most people think if he drops out, that does help Trump. A lot of his voters, if not for him, maybe Trump's their second choice. So that's reported that he might drop out by the end of the week. His vice presidential pick said on a podcast that was the plan if they drop out, to support Trump. And then I reported today exclusively that Democrats have been pushing Cornel West this week in Chicago to drop out and are dangling positions for him in the Harris administration and financial incentives. I don't have details on those financial incentives, but I can only imagine. To be clear, Cornel West told him to kick rocks. He's staying in. But, I mean, it's pretty major news because if RFK is out, Ben, I mean, I'm not a political pundit, but I do think that might potentially help Trump.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, with both of them in, look, a lot more people are going to vote, for RFK if he's in than are going to vote for Cornel West, which is, not the way I wish it was. Right. But I mean, it does seem pretty obviously true. So I could see that if they're both in, Democrats would think that they were getting the better end of that bargain because RFK is mostly pulling from Trump. But yeah, no, all of that makes sense. I mean, it's really bizarre to me that like to think back to the fact that RFK started all this off running as a Democrat, and he even got some support from some left or left adjacent commentators who thought who have like a really low bar for what counts as a form of populism.
Are we talking about anyone specifically? Rhymes with adore. Yeah,
I could possibly say. Yes. Shimmy Shore and people of that nature. They have but it's like, yeah, look, I mean, it's amazing to me because it's like now, according to his running mate, the whole discussion is, should they stay in or should they drop out and endorse Trump? Because of course, if they were going to drop out, they'd obviously endorse Trump. Because that's the side they're on. I mean, like I actually connected to what we were just talking about. I think, I've had the very depressing thought many times the last few months that out of the three biggest candidates, it's amazing that the third party one is somehow maybe the greater evil in Palestine. Like the RFK stuff, like might actually be the worst I've seen any of the three of them say, which is really saying something. Yeah,
absolutely. And Steve, my last question, and I hate to tell you not to monologue, but I have about 3 minutes. All this hubbubaloo about democracy, and I'm not going to minimize it. We've talked about it. I think Trump is a threat. But all this talk about democracy and, Obama and Michelle Obama, hope is on the comeback, Michelle Obama said. How's this for democracy? The Democrats have successfully kicked Cornel West off the ballot in Michigan. The FEC isn't giving Jill Stein funds that she earned. We know what he's not my cup of tea, but they've screwed RFK Jr. on ballot measures. Right now, they're trying to force Cornel West out of the race, which I just reported. I don't know. You could just be a team blue or wear your team blue hat or team red hat, but I would think that democracy includes like not canceling the primary, which they did for Biden, or if the president drops out, to have a real competition rather than just anoint Harris and actually have more competitors. Doesn't seem like we have a thriving democracy on display in Chicago.
We don't have a democracy at all. I mean, I talked about the Princeton study. I think that's well known. We literally live in an oligarchy. And the very veneer of a democracy, I believe, is purely to manufacture consent, which is why they don't have any Palestinians on stage. And I will say this, one of the things that I think is most important, if you're even remotely into sports at all, you understand sometimes your team is better on defense than it is on offense. And I'm telling you right now, Democrats will fall asleep at brunch over a genocide when Biden or Harris is in office. But out of office, if Donald Trump didn't have the proper technique in his comb over, they would be out there in droves protesting it. So the opportunity to end a genocide, you have to ask yourself, I'm not saying this is the way to go because I'm not voting for Trump, but I am telling you this, Democrats in power are like a pillow on the face of a Palestinian child. They are not going to do anything other than keep doing what they're doing, high roading people, etc. I've stood on my head screaming about what a jackass RFK is. I believe that Trump is an absolute jackass, but Kamala Harris and that entire bunch of centrist shitlibs, let's just call them for what they are, absolutely 100% will put 75% of the vote blue sycophants back to sleep over the next 4 years. Palestinians don't have a chance with a Democrat in office. That's the problem.
I must have you back on, both of you, when we're not pressed for time. Thank you, Ben Burgis. Thank you, Steve Grumbine. You guys are great. Definitely check out Ben on his YouTube channel. Give him an argument. Steve Grumbine, co-founder, Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action on YouTube. Are we taking a quick break or going right to Jodie? Okay. I think we will take a quick break and we'll be back with Jodie Evans, the co-founder of Code Pink.
Congratulations for always being somewhere where mainstream media is not.
Jordan Sheridan live, Status Coup in Ottumwa, Iowa, in front of Winter Park High School, Buffalo, New York. Here in Louisville, Kentucky. Here in Flint, Michigan. This was fire. This was absolute fire.
I don't know if Manchin is delusional or if he thinks we're that stupid.
They ran the water for 10 minutes and they told her, oh, the water's fine. But meanwhile, the baby's got blisters everywhere.
When I turn my water on now, you can smell it.
I cry every day because my baby's skin break out. And I feel like that's just not right. They shouldn't have to go through this.
I smell the water as of 6 months ago. It smells like shit, but they say it's safe. They say it's clean.
You intentionally went to her house illegally to serve that illegal warrant. You intentionally murdered her, period.
So that is just some of the amazing work we've done here at Status Coup on the ground. I know it's a radical thing, but we actually leave the studio and go across America covering worker exploitation, poverty, extremism, union organizing, worker strikes, environmental genocide. The Flint water disaster is still going on, among other things. And we have covered over 70. Let me repeat, over 70. When I say we, I should say John Farina for us has covered over 70 of these ceasefire protests. He's covered them on on college campuses. He's covered them in the streets of New York City, in DC. We've covered them in LA and now in Chicago. Please, glasses coming off. We need you. We need you. There's a lot of people asking for money. Most of them sit in their studio and bloviate. We are out on the ground and it's a lot of money. And we do not have money coming from RFK Jr. We do not have money coming from the big banks, the fossil fuckers, big pharma, big real estate, Silicon Valley, or the military industrial complex. Our funding comes directly from you. So if you can find it in your heart or wallet tonight, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. $5 a month equals 16 cents a day. Joining me now, I'm so delighted. I don't know if I've ever had you on. Jodie Evans, she's the co-founder of Code Pink. They have been in the fight probably longer than I've been alive, actually. But you're out there in Chicago, and you are seeing what we are covering, which is the brutality that has been going on, I mean, in America for a long time, but particularly these past 10 months. I just want to play this short clip to show people, if they haven't seen, what Chicago police have been doing to peaceful pro-Palestinian protesters.
Move back! Move back! Move back! Back up! Move back! Back up! Move back! Move back! Move back! Move back! Move back! On 2 minutes, you guys got to back up. We're going to give you guys a warning. You guys got to back up. Move back. Bring it on the police. Get behind the police. Stay right there. You are not going to come up and swing your fingers in front of an officer. Do you understand? Do you understand? You can say what you want, but you can't throw your hands in an officer's face. Thank you. Do you understand? You've been warned. Do you understand? Yeah, I understand you. You've been warned. I understand you. I seen you arrest a lot of good people tonight, and I'm worked up. And we saw you burn. I didn't burn shit. So here's the deal. Here's the deal. You can leave. You can leave. Let him go. Let him go. Now, you can leave. But do not ever walk up to our office.
So that was just some of it. We got footage of them tasing people. We got footage of them beating people. And this is all going on while the feel-good vibes are going on inside the United Center. Sure seems to be an alternate reality, Jodie.
Yeah, I've been living in both of the realities, and they are totally extremely different. And, you know, I just left the rally in Union Park where you can feel the tension, the cops are around it. It's a peaceful rally, and they just surround it. And, you know, what's interesting that's not in that is that that discourages people from coming out and being together at the rallies and the marches. And we saw it in the New York Times and the Washington Post and all the mainstream media, the Chicago papers. Oh my God, it's going to be Chicago 68 again, and the cops are going to be violent. So it's also a silencing of the voices that want to come out and be together and stand for Palestine. It's silencing.
And could you kind of take people through that, because you were inside last night, you had a sign. We know we could show that on screen. We know that on Monday they disappeared people that protested. People were yanking the sign from them. They were dimming the lights to try and hide that. But can you kind of take people inside, which you were there last night? It sure seems like they just have like a quick reflex to try and just paper over that and act like there is no resistance and it's just a small fraction of people that care about this.
Yeah, that seems to be their strategy this time. This is our 20th year at disrupting Democratic and Republican conventions. And this one is very different. First of all, it looks like they've told the cameras that when there's a disruption to look away. We're used to, when we disrupt, the cameras all coming on us, but that is not what's happening. They are looking away. On Monday night, when the uncommitted delegates held up the Free Palestine banner, the cameras were told to look away. So, you know, they've been told disruptions are not what you're covering. Just like they've told delegates to shut up, buck up, and get on the program. So it's very controlled in every way possible. No matter where we're disrupting, there are cops. Just spent 4 hours outside of the Democrats for Israel event with all the mainstream Democrats coming in. And the cops were heavy on us, pushing back, you know, standing there with a banner, pushing back. Inside the convention, you know, they were on me in a minute, pulling me out and pulling out even the people that are the photographers that are with us. So they also get punished. I just disrupted Congressman Jamie Raskin at the climate caucus. All of us were pulled out together and, you know, all the passes taken away, etc. That's not happened in the past. This one, but there's never been quite a coronation like this or a production. This isn't democracy. I was at my first convention in 1974 as a delegate. I was 21 years old. And I know the difference between when there's some fights actually trying to happen and when there's some struggle, when there's some education. We have to remember when there's conflict, that's where education happens. That's where people learn. But if everyone's just told to be a sheep, no one's learning anything. And I say that what we're doing is what democracy looks like.
Right. And my last question, obviously you can't get in Biden's head, Harris's head, but this is not your first rodeo. It's not my first rodeo. I follow the money. I mean, Biden said he was going to pause a shipment to Israel a couple months ago. Then one of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party, Haim Saban, net worth of $3 billion, ardent Zionist. He stole the Power Rangers, by the way, from, I think, the Japanese. He huffed and puffed, and he sent a harsh letter to Biden's top advisors. And that immediately was reversed. In those donor boxes, you have VIP donors. They're having, they have different passes than everybody else. Some of them happen to be Jewish. I'm Jewish, so I just call a spade. But some of them happen to be Jewish, and some of them happen to be ardent Zionists. Jeffrey Katzenberg is the co-chair of Biden's campaign. Still, I believe, Harris's campaign, net worth just under $1 billion. Ardent Zionists. Nothing wrong with being Jewish, but I happen to think this might have something to do with why Biden and by extension Harris, seem to just be kind of going along to get along on this issue.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's truly nauseating and infuriating is right after October 7th, Biden left the White House and went out to raise money. And every single host of those fundraisers was a Zionist, including Haim Saban. So he raised, I think, something like $500 million on that. He was being funded by those who wanted to destroy Palestine. It was disgusting and gross on steroids. But, that is the funding base of this election. And I always say, democracy happens until you vote. And that's when you have a chance to use your voice, which is democracy. And so now is the time when people are like, you're voting, who you're voting for. I'm like, you aren't going to know how to vote on November 3rd. And if we can't tell, the world is changing so fast, who knows what it's going to look like. The pro-Palestinian movement was successful in getting Biden out of the race. But what we have to pay attention to is that that's when you have a chance to use your voice. As soon as you cast that vote, they own you. Right now, they need you. As soon as they're in, they own it. You are white noise. They don't really care what you say. They are owned by the Zionists. They are owned by the rich, and they are owned by the military-industrial complex. And at Code Pink, we have a campaign called Bought by Zionism. And if you want to know what your member of Congress or your senator has taken from the Zionist lobby, you can find it out there. And I encourage you to make phone calls and disrupt their offices, because right now is the only time you can make them uncomfortable. They need you.
And my last question delves into a bit of the psychological, spiritual, but you've seen on the left in recent years, a lot of people are dejected. A lot of people are just fed up. A lot of people don't know what direction to go, and they're just tired. They're tired of showing up to protests when it doesn't seem like anything's changing, tired of direct action, tired of knocking on doors. I mean, you, Medea Benjamin, a lot of your other members, you've been going for 20, 30 years. How the hell do you keep
55?
There you go. How the hell do you keep this up? I mean, what is your message to people that if it's Trump or Harris, I mean, people are just fed up and kind of a lot of people are starting to give up?
Well, I say I stand on the shoulders of people who are more courageous than I'll ever have to be, including, when I first read about, Emma Goldman when I was maybe 15 years old. People that went to jail, people that were murdered. We forget the history of this country and its genocide and slavery and violence against those who stand for equality and peace. So very early in Code Pink, I realized, we can't end war till we end the war economy. War just serves the war economy. So, and we're also can't be parsley on the plate of the system of the war economy, the extractive, destructive, oppressive economy that's killing you, your community, and the planet. So it depends on what you expect. The system is going to behave like the system, and the people that work for the system are going to behave to serve the system. So you need to have your efforts fit what reality is. And that's the reality. And so at Code Pink, we spend all our time shining a light on the violence of the empire you live on, scratching at it, making sure it can feel that it's doing something wrong, because there's no friction to their madness. So we try to be friction, and we try to be wake-up calls. We try to hold them accountable and be there for their psyches to have to feel what they're doing to others. But it's a very rare occasion somebody who I call is on crack cocaine of power to not suck up to the money and the power. It's a crack cocaine. We have to remember that. And so it depends on, what is your heart committed to? My heart's committed to the people across the world, not just in the United States, but globally. I'm an internationalist. So right now, I feel so hopeful, watching the world look at what happened to Ukraine. And when the US sanctioned Russia, leaders in the rest of the world were like, if they can do that to Russia, we're screwed. So they really said, we have to get rid of this hegemony and start giving BRICS more power. And then Palestine happens, and the curtains are pulled back, and everyone can see the violence of the power of the United States. And yes, it has nuclear weapons. It's the 70,000 ton elephant in the room that everyone's afraid of. But all I have is my heart to stand up in the face of it, as I've seen people do for a long time in the United States. Those are my inspiration. And if the change doesn't happen in my lifetime, I feel like I'm keeping the light lit. I'm passing it down. I'm inspiring others. And while I'm doing that, I'm helping people cultivate a local peace economy. I see where all this has taken us as our kind of flood, but it's going to be a tsunami, global inequality, global climate change, AI, fascism. We created all of that, and nothing is happening to get in the way of it. So I say you have to build yourself an arc to get through it. And that's a local peace economy, because we've forgotten how to be in community. We've forgotten how to be together and serve each other and actually fulfill the needs of humanity, instead of be caught up in these proxies that don't serve our heart or our bellies. And I think when they force us to be in the fight with them, I call that a proxy, because we're in a fight we can't win. But when you're in a struggle together for values that are meaningful for your heart, and you understand what the system is, it just nourishes you. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you young. It's what, we're serving life. And when you think you're going to change a system that is that structurally settled and has all the money and all the weapons, it's about finding the cracks. And I would say the pro-Palestinian movement found the crack, and really, with those voices, undermined the power. And the rest of the world is inspired by that. Let's remember, when we do this, we're inspiring people globally, and that has happened.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. Thanks for hustling. I know you hustled from the protest over here, and everybody keep in touch and keep an eye on Code Pink's socials, because they are certainly rabble rousing as always at the DNC and elsewhere. Thanks again.
Or join us at your member of Congress's office, or following Medea around the halls of Congress in DC. We have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. Take care. And also, remember, folks, we have a massive show still ahead. We're going to have Kshama Sawant, former Seattle City Council member, coming up soon. She's with Workers Strike Back. A little later, we'll have Jill Stein. We're going to focus a lot on third parties. Also going to ask some tough questions, because frankly, I asked tough questions of the whole work inside the Democratic Party crowd yesterday, so I wanted to challenge Jill Stein as well. We're also going to have Stephen Donziger on the environmental genocide going on in America and the corporate crimes that have been legalized. We're going to have Winona LaDuke coming up next. She is a longtime Indigenous activist. We need to explore whether Tim Walz, the progressive, air quotes, progressive vice presidential choice by Kamala Harris. Well, Winona LaDuke has some thoughts on that and what he did to Indigenous activists in Minnesota. So we are definitely going to explore fact or fiction on Tim Walz, who is definitely a better choice than Josh Shapiro, but we need to definitely explore his record. Also going to have Jasmine Banks, Uncoke My Campus, which is an awesome project she's been working on for years. So we got to explore that. And most importantly, we are going to grow status quo. That's the whole point of this, to counter the corporate propaganda, the theater that is going on in the DNC right now with what's actually going on. That's why we've been on the ground in Chicago. That's why we've covered over 70 ceasefire protests over the last 10 months. That's why we're across the country, still on the water crisis in Flint, still covering the disaster in East Palestine and Western Pennsylvania after Norfolk Southern chemically nuked those communities with chemicals. That's why we go down to Cop City to cover the $100 million militarized police compound. But we need your support. So if you can, sign up tonight. We're trying to grow hundreds of paid members this week. We've already grown, I believe, yesterday and today, about 30. So we need to do some work. Statuscoup.com/join. Sign up for a burnt cup of Starbucks coffee a day. That's $5 a month. No offense. I love my labor friends in Starbucks. $5 a month. That equals 16 cents a day. Coming up next is Indigenous activist Winona LaDuke. Before that, let's show a little bit about our We and Goliath, who has helped us with the production of this show, as well as Status Coup. All right, welcome back. Remember, smash that like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. We might be live again later tonight. Don't know. It depends what happens in Chicago. I want to go next to a longtime Indigenous activist. You're not going to hear a lot about Native American rights, maybe a little lip service in the DNC. Certainly won't hear about it at the Republican National Convention either. But I spoke the other day to Winona LaDuke, longtime Native American activist, has been arrested on the front lines fighting for Mother Earth. Also spoke about Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate for the Democrats, and how progressive is he really? Let's take a listen to her experience, particularly with Tim Walz, and how he dealt with Native Americans fighting against the Line 3 pipeline in Minnesota.
Our women are sacred. When there is an oil spill in the Mississippi headwaters because of Enron. Sister Sasha, I will leave this space with nothing but respect and short and glory because of the intentions against my people.
Our rivers are dry in the north, Tim, and I can barely see the Enbridge trucks sucking water out of municipal water supplies in northern Minnesota because of the fires in the sky and the smoke. What is this world we are living in? This time was prophesied by our ancestors. This is called the time of the seventh fire, when we got to make a choice between a scorched path and a green path. Tim Walz and the other guys is on a scorched path. And that's not the leadership we need in Minnesota. Hey, what happened to the Paul Wellstone legacy, Minnesota? That was our hero. That was a guy who stood for the little people like me. I'm like a lot of the other water protectors here facing charges in 3 counties. I'm not a criminal. I'm a water protector. The criminal is Enbridge. That's the criminal.
Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by longtime Indigenous activists, member of the Anishinaabekwe tribe, and you have been fighting Line 3, among other disastrous pipelines and fossil fuel projects that have been mostly going through treaty land over the years. And last year, you were thankfully, charges against you were dropped. for your activism and trying to protect the water. For Line 3, which is some of the dirtiest tar sands oil in the land going through Minnesota. For those that don't know about the fight against Line 3, could you kind of talk about what Line 3 pipeline is, and that this was essentially, Bill McKibben called it game over for the climate if this went through?
Yeah, just a little bit of history and perspective. I mean, so first, I'm here, happy to be here with you and to visit a little bit. And I am, of course, a 2-time vice presidential candidate, a Green Party candidate, for those who didn't know. And so I don't really, let's say, have a dog in this fight. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, but I'm here for Mother Earth. And so I'm here, I'm happy to talk to you about kind of how we got to where we are, and in particular, Waltz and, the concerns about Line 3. So a little bit of background. Anishinaabe people are in the northern part of 5 American states, southern part of 4 Canadian provinces. We have a fifth of the world's water. Seems like something you'd want to protect, like the Great Lakes. You have a Canadian multinational, Enbridge, who has 75% of the tar sands coming into the United States from Canada, dirtiest oil in the world, not necessary, not needed, who've been replumbing the North after they decided that they didn't, it was a U.S. policy because the largest oil reserves in the world are actually in Venezuela. I don't know if you know that, but
yeah.
But we don't do business with Venezuela, and we want to do politically bad things. And so we just replumb North America to get Canadian tar sands oil out and drag them across a bunch of indigenous territories and act like it's all good in domestic energy. It's not domestic energy. It's Canadian oil that shouldn't have ever left the ground, right? So a couple of years ago, there were 5 tar sands pipeline proposals, 5. And of those, 3 got in, or 2 got in. Let me just think of this. Energy East didn't happen. The Keystone XL didn't happen, right? Enbridge's project called the Northern Gateway also didn't happen. And so that meant that there's 2 pipelines that did get through, Trans Mountain, which we might as well just name it, Pierre Trudeau 2 or something like that, because, he financed it. He figured out how to make it happen. And that takes oil to the west so that they can sell to China and Western markets. And then the second one is Line 3, which was heavily battled and poses some really big problems to all of us. I mean, I'm interested in looking at the fact that, there's something called the FARA Act, which requires foreign agents to actually register. And so I'm wondering if the Canadian multinational Enbridge, which lobbied $8 million worth, $11 million worth of lobbying and $8.6 million worth of police, might have violated the Foreign Agent Act because, if you finance the police, that should be kind of a problem, I would think.
Yeah.
When you have when you have foreign multinationals paying for your police force. And that's something that Tim Waltz did. That's something that Tim Waltz did and made happen. And so I just want to flag that for everybody else, because if the Minnesota model is the model for the future, where we're going to be, having Canadian multinationals finance our police in basically Wisconsin and Michigan, where they're going for Enbridge 5.0, which has huge trespass claims under the Bad River Reservation and has a pipe underneath the streets of Mackinac. They're going to try to enforce that with Canadian finance police again. And I think that that's a problem. And that's a problem that actually should be a national problem, not just a Minnesota problem, right? So they got. Let
me ask you about Tim Walz, because obviously the media and Democrats have been having a honeymoon with him. He's been painted as very progressive, kind of this Midwestern dude, wholesome. But by everything I've seen, he basically unleashed the police on you and other protesters and worked with Enbridge to do it.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, they sold their soul to the Canadian pipeline company, and just to point out, like, kind of just a mess it is. We're sitting here talking about energy issues. We're talking about like how you're going to save energy. Who's the largest energy consumer in the state of Minnesota? Well, that would be Enbridge, because moving sludge takes power. They use far more money than the city of Minneapolis, far more energy. So these are the kind of systemic questions that really need to be addressed for all of us. Like, what are we generating power for? Are you going to have a solar powered pipeline? I mean, that's basically what they're proposing, which is kind of backwards, to say the least, a solar powered tar sands pipeline. But Tim was part of this whole process. And, he pitted labor against Native people. He did it. He did it himself. But, and the fact is that there's more jobs in removing old pipelines. It was $2 billion to remove the old Line 3, which is just labor, not hardware. That's some real jobs for some real people. And, instead of that, Tim, called them essential jobs to put in a pipeline during a pandemic, got 4,300 workers in that were mostly from out of state, and engineered an occupation of the North. 4,300 workers and $8 million worth of police and a construction spread that went from, the Red Lake Nation to Duluth. That's an occupation. And that's what it felt like on the ground. And all of us, 1,000 people who were charged, that was Tim. And he needs to take responsibility for it. But we're also looking at the next round of Tim, which is this strategic minerals. 75% of they're on indigenous lands, and everything that is the, unobtainium. We might as well just call it that, unobtainium, the stuff that they need for green energy. Well, a lot of that is in Minnesota, in the middle of our water. So how about we think about what we're doing? Because what I don't want to do is export our problems nationally with Tim Walz's bad ideas. And I think that these are like national discussions. Now, I say that all as criticisms of Tim Walz. Now, just remember that in the spectrum where I live, which is the deep north, that's what it is. It's the deep north. Racism, Trump flew into Bemidji in his last election. Why do you fly into a town of 10,000 people unless you got a lot of haters that are going to join you? Tim Walz is in the middle of that. But, in the spectrum, North and South Dakota are full of Indian hating governors, right? Should I just say that? Wisconsin has a good governor, but a bad legislature, which is, really bad towards Indian people. And Tim Walz is lieutenant governor is a Native woman. If Tim Walz goes to Washington, we have the first Native woman governor in the United States and the first woman governor of Minnesota. So on some level, there's a lot of Indian people that are like, send Tim to Washington. A lot of the policies that he did were not bad. He was heavily influenced by a lot of good people. And, I would say that basically he's done a decent job on many issues, except for his lack of vision, his lack of really understanding of economics, long-term sustainable economics, and pitting labor against Native people, and his lack of absolute appreciation for the water of the region. That's pretty clear. Right. And so that's my concern about Tim.
And let me ask you, because you ran for Green Party, but it all seems to be theater to me. The Democratic Party, they run on, wind, solar, fighting the climate crisis, but Biden doubled drilling on public land when he ran on banning drilling on public land. Obama infamously bragged that he exported the most natural gas of any president. And Trump, of course, has said, drill, baby, drill. But the scam of it all is none of this is causing energy independence. This is all just, like you said, being routed and threatening your lands to then be sold to China and other countries. So where is the energy independence of any of it?
Well, I think we need to talk about late stage fossil fuel addiction. That's what this is. This is addiction behavior. When you just keep trying to fill your fix and you look for new places to fill the same fix. The question is why do we have this fix to fill? Why are we transporting food 1,400 miles from farmer to table? That'd be one question. Why are we powering tar sands pipelines with solar? You want to answer that one for me? Why are we, all this new AI stuff? That's a huge energy suck in our region. Like, how much of it do we actually need? These kind of decisions, there's no conscious decision making. There's just like a fill the need and continue with the inefficiencies. The fact is that America spends about 70% of its energy is lost between point of production and point of consumption. That's according to Lawrence Livermore Labs. We have the most wasteful energy system in the world, and we're still trying to fulfill it. And I'm like, why don't you fix your act up? Why don't you fix up your infrastructure, relocalize it, make it somewhat resilient? That's what a visionary plan would look like. Now, with all of that said, I have to say that, as much disdain as I've had for Biden, particularly in terms of Palestine, I have to say that he's kind of the whole of the donut in the Biden administration. He appointed some really rock star Native people who are doing really good work. National Park Service, you got Chuck Sams, head of the National Park Service. You obviously have Deb Haaland, up there. You got that Western Area Power Administration is Tracy LeBeau. That's in charge of all the power that's held by the feds in the West. Well, her reservation was flooded by WAPA. So she knows what we're talking about. So there's some really good people that were appointed by the Biden administration, kind of the whole of the donut, that guy, Biden. And, what I would like to see is the vision that a lot of those people have implemented, because those people are visionary. and actually really tackling the systemic causes of the not just the systemic causes, but the systemic issues of inefficiency in the system. And then the real need for having labor that does meaningful work. I mean, and labor that does something useful. Like take me, I'm a hemp farmer. I don't know if you know this about me. I'm a fiber hemp farmer, right? Got a bag, came out with Patagonia last year, fabulous bag. We had to ship that stuff all around the world to get it processed. Well, why don't we have a textile industry in this country? That's workers. Minnesota used to have a textile industry. Used to be able to weave, do the whole works here. Don't do that. There's very little because it's all been offshored. So what I'd like to see is some kind of a vision for a real self-reliant, sustainable, durable, low energy, equitable economy. That's what I'd like to see. And I think that most Americans would like to see the same thing.
Absolutely. And we're almost a decade, believe it or not, from the Standing Rock protest. That was 8 years ago. They're still fighting in court, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, to defeat DAPL. And frankly, I mean, when charges were dismissed against yours, a judge actually cited your tribe's treaty rights, which was a breath of fresh air. Can you talk about, as the DNC goes on, they're addressing the Black community, they're addressing the Hispanic community. I hear lip service from Democrats on, the indigenous rights, indigenous communities, but I don't see a lot of policy. I mean, there were some good things from Biden, the infrastructure deal, and had some more rural broadband to reservations, more electricity. But overall, are you seeing enough, obviously not for the Republican Party, but from the Democratic Party on treaties, but more importantly, actual, economic relief to the most impoverished areas in our country?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for your question. I mean, I just went back and took a look. I just went back to Standing Rock, just to say, hey, how's it going out here? 8 years later, what's it looking like? And the fact is that they just did the draft environmental impact statement. That would be last November for the pipeline that they put in 2017. I mean, what kind of a backwards policy is that? Would you like to explain to me how anyone is supposed to believe that there's a working system? I mean, Army Corps of Engineers violated. I was an expert witness in the federal trial. And I was like, they asked, I testified on behalf of the federal government. And I was like, you guys are, you issue nationwide permits for 212 river crossings without even reviewing them. It was an absurd process. So we actually want a system that works. If you want to be big boys and say you own the country, well, act like you're taking care of something. Treaties are these whole larger territories where we have maintained and cared for them and hunted and fished and worked for our whole lives, plus each generation before. We have not seen any semblance of care by the federal government. And so, have a system that works and actually do some restoration work and support Native people. I mean, you're seeing the return of some wildlife refuges, to Native people. We'd like the Tamarack Refuge back in northern Minnesota. The Chippewa National Forest, they returned 11,000 acres of it. Well, what about the other 4,000 acres that you hold? And what about the rest of the land you're holding up there? I mean, land back is a really significant issue for many Native people. And then give us the funding to manage the damn parks. We can manage them just fine, thank you, but give us the funding to do it in a meaningful way. So equity and putting lip service, like I'm very grateful and very proud of the beginning of Land Back that Deb Haaland has begun to manifest, right? Keep it up, make it bigger, stand by it, return lands that are stolen by the feds, held by the feds, and then give us the resources that we are due to take care of those, So many things could be done. I mean, I think all of us, like I said, I'm not a Democrat and I'm not a Republican, but I did breathe a sigh of relief when Joe Biden stepped back. I was like, whew, that's at least something, that's at least something, because a couple of old white guys who represent a bunch of bad ideas is not somebody that's very easy to organize for.
Right. And my last question, obviously, it doesn't get a lot of attention. And as of now, many presidents have chosen not to pardon or commute Leonard Peltier's sentence. He's almost 80. He's been in prison for 50 years. Is not in great health. And there is no evidence he committed the crimes he is in prison for. Biden has the opportunity on his way out to do the right thing here. But Leonard Peltier just had his most recent parole request denied. What is your message to the Democratic Party?
Joe Biden should pardon him. Joe Biden should let Leonard Peltier out of jail. He has done plenty of time for a crime that he did not commit. And the real crime was the COINTELPRO era that caused the chaos and the murders, the 300 murders on the Pine Ridge Reservation, Fred Hampton, Mumia, all these guys in jail from COINTELPRO. That's the crime. And I don't want to see a return to COINTELPRO, but what I want to see is Leonard Peltier gets a pardon. And that would be a courageous thing for Joe to do on his way to his retirement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Winona LaDuke. I botched it before, but Anishinaabe tribe member, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you so much for the call, and let us pray and work like hell, right?
Absolutely. Take care. Very few people that are genuinely badasses. Winona LaDuke is one of them. Awesome to talk to her. She's been an inspiration for a long time. Smash that like button, share this live stream so we can get it out to more people. The more people that press like, the more people that will see this very live stream. And also, please, pretty please, we'll give you a shout out. Sign up, statuscoup.com/join. We can only grow. We can only stay on the road covering these protests as long as you keep us out there. Statuscoup.com/join. It's that simple. Go to statuscoup.com/join. The link is right under the video. Click on that. You can sign up for $5 a month. That's 16 cents a day. How many independent, keyword independent, Enbridge is not giving us money. Exxon is not giving us money. Goldman Sachs is not giving us money. How many independent outlets are in the trenches, rolling up their sleeves, covering environmental genocide and all the rest? Please support us. Statuscoup.com/join. We're going to do a quick promo for our on-the-ground coverage at Cop City, and then we're going to come back with Jasmine Banks. She's doing incredible work with Uncoke My Campus, which you might not know about this, so you definitely want to know. We'll be right back.
The local constituents don't want Cop City to happen. There's environmental issues, including building a larger gun range that would cause poisoning for the South River.
This Cop City is going to destroy this pristine green forest space, the largest green space in Atlanta.
Stop Cop City! Stop Cop City!
All right, so they're now targeting some of the buildings of, I believe, investors in the Police Foundation. Wells Fargo is one of the largest investors in the Atlanta Police Foundation. Colin, get that. There's another firework. All right, so we are in downtown Atlanta for the Cop City protest, where Tort, who is a forest defender, was killed by a state trooper this week. There are 13 other activists that are facing charges of domestic terrorism by the GBI, which is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Ago, President Donald Trump had emerged from 2020's summer of protests with threats to send as many as 75,000 agents of the federal government into U.S. cities to bash protesters. He threatened mayors and governors who didn't embrace his violent approach to dissent. That was on top of the Muslim ban, the very fine people in Charlottesville, the kids in cages, the suggestion that soldiers shoot Black Lives Matter demonstrators in the legs. It was then that I first appeared as a host on MSNBC with this message. I've worked around the globe. I've interviewed prime ministers and government officials, dictators, despots, authoritarians. And I think it's time in America that we finally have a proper conversation about the F word. No, not that one. Fascism. Are we still saying this is not at all reminiscent of fascism? A few liberal commentators agreed with me back then, but not many. The mainstream reactions were predictable. This is America. We don't elect fascists. That's alarmism, hyperbole. Even, they said, when it was applied to the man who started his reign with rants about American carnage and who finished it by trying to overturn an election he lost. Now that man wants his old office back, and we have been treated to a 3-year roller coaster of further evidence that Donald Trump is, in fact, the fascist candidate for American president.
Community, the #1 threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This shows how the federal government is all in on this issue. This is an issue to pay attention to as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment.
Joining me now, Jasmine Banks. You founded Uncoke My Campus, which just sounds badass. First, tell people who don't know, what is Uncoke My Campus and how'd you first get involved?
Yeah, let me correct you lovingly. I did not found it. I actually came to Uncoke My Campus as a worker. So when I initially came, I had no clue what it was. I was a single mom who was navigating how do I spend time with my kids who were my business, like the thing that I wanted to do most in life in the very beginning of my life. But I didn't want to be like a latchkey mom because I had that experience. I was like, I guess I'm an elder millennial. I don't know what the people are calling me these days, but I saw an ad and I said yes to a job because I thought it looked removed from the harm that I was like re-experiencing in all the other nonprofit spaces that I was looking at. And so the original vision of Uncoke My Campus was these young people had some resources and had some ideas, and they thought if they could uncover and create more transparency inside of higher ed, that that would stop Charles and David Koch from utilizing the institution of higher education as sort of like an idea reproductive factory supercharged and manufacturing consent of young people who are going into higher ed thinking they're making themselves better and their lives better and their communities better. And it turns out they were just, being fed these ideas that, bankrolled behind these two people they didn't trust. So, so that's the work that I started out with. And I've been leading it for the last couple of years while working other full-time jobs and consulting because I had the brilliant and wonderful idea. One of the best ideas I've ever had was to have 4 crazy wild kids. So I've kind of like tried to balance those two things, but like it's making me really tired. As you can see, like I'm in the back here and the exercise gurus told me to buy Peloton. I did that. I did have some plants on my wall. I took up like art of my children. Like I have been through all the timelines in the process and I'm getting a little fatigued.
I just put my hand over my head because I've been in childcare hell for 2 weeks. I don't have childcare at the moment. I only have 1 kid, so 4, I might have a seizure. But it's been wonderful chasing my daughter around while trying to work. Still love her. I wanted to ask because there's so much focus on, how much money Kamala's raising, how much money Trump's raising, the super PACs. There's one Koch brother left, but you don't really hear that much about it in the media anymore. I don't think he's donated yet to Trump, but they got their tentacles, or he has his tentacles everywhere.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out the propaganda that they spread on campuses. Can you kind of tell people who don't know right now, how far reaching is it, the Koch Network and all the other subsidiaries?
I learned a lot from folks like Lisa Graves and Nancy McClain when I came into that space. And I want to, pay respect and care to all of the things that they've offered me as far as wisdom and lessons. But I also realized that, some of the strategies that the folks who cared about the Charles Koch and David Koch, their impact on an institution of democracy, or as I would call it, like the people's business, right? Like the common good. It was not motivating regular everyday people like me, like the prophetess Cardi B would say, like regular degular, like that, those kind of people. And so I don't want to like leverage critiques of folks who are in the fight with me. I really love and respect those people in all kinds of different ways. But the lessons just stopped coming through to me. And I want to make sure that whatever lessons are being taught, whatever lessons are being supercharged or chosen or deeply resourced, that is not one being taught by corporations who are like running with this weird invisible government that none of us can access. And they just like keep throwing rocks and hiding their hands and saying that they're negotiating, but they're in bad faith. I want it to be in a space where folks can like really know who's doing the work with them, right? Like in a way that they can recognize it, in the way that they can see it. Yeah, and like I just combined all of my experience as a mom, caring and like being in the middle of my stuff, my groundedness, not in a way that was like extractive of my identity or performance, but was like some real shit. Sorry, I'm trying to learn that practice of like civil discourse and showing up, but that like fire starter in me that I know I can be keeps coming up. And so anyway, after COVID, with all of this struggle, I was in all of these different timelines, being put in all these different positions, and I kept trying to do it the right way, like through meritocracy, through pulling myself up by my bootstraps. I'd followed all of the rules, and I had to adapt because at that point, it was like there are clear waves coming in our future, right? Like, and I hope the progressives can hear me as a loving suggestion and a compassionate warning from my own experience of surviving neo-colonial conditions, neoliberal conditions, and neo-fascist conditions, all at the same time and separately. That the two waves that are coming after me, right? It's like I want to be like a lover. I want to be a silly girl. I want to be like the nice mom. But this whole thing with Mamala and the dad, like the nuclear family model that the neoliberal like strategy process is being played, what it's going to do is it's going to kick up, it's going to call, the stories are going to call forward people like myself who have had intense developmental childhood trauma, who have been abandoned, who have been dispossessed, who have been left behind. What it's going to do is going to signal to the folks who are hearing the word weird right now, and they're like, wait, I feel like I'm kind of weird. Do I belong to that? And it's going to give the wrong lesson to those who haven't done their work, their interpersonal work, their family work, built their squad and their cliques, so, settled their differences and gotten formation. And then the people who come after me are pretty intense, but the ringer is the planet, right? Like the planet doesn't play with us. The planet will equalize all of us. Like no identities, no social constructs, no new language or technocratic solutions. The planet don't play. It is a snake that will eat its own tail. So yeah, sorry, I have ADHD and I really like to just get on.
No, that's okay. My last question, since you've been immersed with young people, can you tell me? I mean, I kind of think that the Democratic Party might be losing young people for possibly a generation right now. It's not just young people protesting, but I mean, by the polls and what we see on the streets, we've covered over 70 of these ceasefire protests. I don't think this is an issue young people are just going to forget about. I think it's going to turn them off, frankly, to both parties. Do you think Democrats risk, losing millennial Gen Z over Gaza?
I think they're already losing, and it's not even just like this flattened layer. It's not like lasagna generation or whatever metaphor. I just go in and out of all of these different metaphors. It is a habit of mine, but I've talked to my children. I've talked to other people's children. I've talked to their older children. I've talked to their young adults. I've talked to their elders. I go out and have conversations, not just like conversations where I'm trying to like find the information that I need to get from them, but just to know them, to connect with them. And what I hear unequivocally across all of those generations is it's not working. You're losing them. And the whole nuclear family and parent thing is even more inflammatory because a lot of us were raised by parents who, and we're not going to judge them. We're going to love them because they had their conditions and they had their constraints, right? But they were authoritarians. And some of our parents, even worse, told us things that were abusive and did things to us that were abusive. And they called it love instead of what it was, right? And so this like okie doke situation that the neoliberals and even the progressives are doing is underestimating that we have a supercomputer between our eyes here, between our ears, and then the big tech has given us a supercomputer in our hand. So they're accelerating. These tech bros, this big business, are accelerating. They're using the capitalists' own obsession to think that the ends justify the means. But when the things that you're moving fast and breaking things, and the things are my children, the things are my body and my life, you are not creating the conditions for us to be able to win and organize power. What you're doing is you're making a bunch of really angry people who have a global stake in it. And some of us can organize them and de-escalate and deprogram and invite kindness and love and care. But there will also be the people who don't have those brakes on, and their purpose outside of being anchored in community is to start fires and to break things, and they're the ringers. But then again, after that ringer is the final boss in the video game. When you thought you finished Pokemon Go, and then you find out you got all these side quests to do, you're gonna get planet Earth. You're gonna get the 7 generations of people. So I had 3 lessons, and I'll be quick because, you know, I have to go to a date with my wife, Mo, and that's where I'm going. So number 1, I suggested a 3-point strategy. Is really quick. Confirm that the rules of engagement are real and that the current guard wants to act in good faith with all of these multiple generations that they have to hold in tension. They need to let the tired ones or the hurt ones rest and thank them for their service, and create a 3-point strategy around belonging, safety, care, and dignity, you know, and provide for their material conditions, because we're living in this hellscape that was someone's imagination at one point, not mine, hopefully not yours, but yeah, it's somebody's, and they had a lot of money to get it done. And then I need the people who get the power to do their job, and I need them to do what my grandmama said, which is just act right. Because if you don't act right, people like me, everyday people who are just trying to live, are going to have to do the things that all African-American aunties, most of us at least, you know, all Native and Indigenous and folks who have been on the periphery of power know what we have to do. We have to make time, even though we don't have time, because we want to be at the PTO, we want to be with our kids, we want to be sleeping. That's where our desire is. But y'all are going to force us to have to organize, and I'll be one of the people to organize them. And that's what Generation Common Good is going to do. Or we can do like Coke. It's just like, it's what do you want to do?
Right.
And to the people who say, well, you know, the Koch Network does this, or what about this billionaire or that? Just like a broken clock can be right 2 times a day. Come on, y'all. Y'all are smart. Absolutely. And we can grow up, and it's safe to become an adult. It's safe to grow up. It's hard, it's painful, it's life.
Tell people where they can find more info about your new group, Generation Common Good.
Yeah, just go to generationcommongood.org. We have a solidarity pledge. We are not asking you to come and be perfect or be neurotypical or be a certain identity or be a certain class. I just want to invite you to hang out with me and the cool friends that I put together. You know, like I have a whole bunch of millennial friends. I got boomer friends. I got weird cosplay friends. That's the other thing that makes me mad about this whole weird narrative. Like some of us really take pride. Like my Gen Z? No, Gen X. The Gen Xers, they love weird. Like they were raised on Daria and Ren and Stimpy, like all kinds of weird stuff. We're not going to do this binary choice of this is the good team and this is the bad team. You can think in more dimensions than 2. You can even think in more dimensions than 3, I'm told. But anyway, I'm out of time, and I really appreciate you. And hello, strangers on the internet. Some of y'all seem dangerous, but hopefully we can hang out.
Thanks so much for taking the time, Jasmine Banks. Definitely check out her new organization, Generation Common Good. Have a good date with your wife.
Peace.
All right. We'll be right back. One more quick break, and then we will be joined by Stephen Donziger, who was wrongly made a corporate political prisoner for 3 years.
According to the last IPCC report, the human race has approximately 8 years to get off of fossil fuels and to stop putting excess carbon into the atmosphere. We just don't have time for today's youth to spend the next decade learning how to build big movements, only to get crushed by the corporate state and then apply those lessons. We will be doing leadership trainings for frontline activists and college kids in cities across America. We hope to share this theory of change and strategies to help local coalitions work in solidarity.
I'm hoping to get out of this training basically just learning how we can work with and put pressure on political leaders to pass climate legislation.
It's beautiful for us to lean into the discomfort together as a collective. We all had our individual angles of wanting to show up and care for the world, but we also showed up for each other in that way by asking questions, being curious, being courageous, and even more than anything else, we get to celebrate each other, which was just a holistic experience of activism. I've really never experienced anything like that before.
I feel less cloudy, a little bit less anxious, definitely empowered.
I really appreciated this workshop and just having a space to be with other people who have a vision for a world that hasn't been created yet, but a world that we're trying to make together.
The problems we face are great, but history has taught us time and time again that with the right vision, strategy, and solidarity, the 99% can triumph. But it's going to take all of us doing our part.
That was Jay Ponte. Jay Ponte, a longtime activist. He has been instrumental in producing this show as a producer. So thanks to Jay. Definitely check out his book also, Be the Revolution. It kind of goes from Occupy Wall Street through both Bernie waves, 2016, 2020, Standing Rock, and really ties all of them together. So check it out, Be the Revolution. And thanks for his help with this 3-day mega show. Remember, we need you. Please, please, we need you. If you're new to Status Coup, subscribe. And if you can, sign up, statuscoup.com/join. We are one of the only outlets in America that is independent and consistently in the trenches, on the ground, covering environmental genocide, worker exploitation, union organizing, worker strikes, water contamination, political corruption. We don't have any sugar daddies or sugar mamas funding us from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And we do not have any funding from the big banks, the fossil fuckers, big pharma, big sugar, big real estate, Silicon Valley, or the military-industrial complex. Speaking of corporate criminals, do you know that a human rights lawyer was basically made a corporate political prisoner for 3 years? His name's Steven Donziger. We've covered it for years. I was delighted that he joined me yesterday. We talked about a lot of the environmental genocide. Yes, I use the word genocide because that is happening in America. It's not just bodies piling up acutely. Genocide could happen over time, and it is happening in America. Steven Donziger goes through both his story and also a lot of the really, really horrible things happening in America right now that you need to know about. Let's take a look at my conversation with Steven. I am delighted to be joined by Steven Donziger, human rights and environmental activist, was an attorney before he was wrongfully disbarred. Steven, there's people that are watching that are new and don't know your story. It's a long story, but the Cliff Notes version is you were basically a political prisoner for 3 years, both house arrest and then actual prison, because you had the temerity to go after Chevron legally for them poisoning the Amazon in Ecuador. And Chevron, instead of paying to remediate that, went on a political corporate crusade against you.
Yeah, and basically, I represent indigenous and farmer communities in the Amazon of Ecuador. Over many years, we litigated a massive pollution case, won roughly a $10 billion judgment against Chevron. Instead of paying, they came back this is in Ecuador's court. It's affirmed by Ecuador Supreme Court, the case. Instead of paying, Chevron came back to U.S. courts and started to attack me. They sued me for $60 billion, most amount of money anyone's ever been sued for. And ultimately, we kept going, and they got a judge to hold me in criminal contempt of court. And the prosecutor would not prosecute the case. It was a baseless case. And the judge appointed a Chevron law firm to prosecute me in the name of the U.S. government, which is why I am the only person ever that we know of who's been prosecuted directly by a corporation, a private corporation, and detained in U.S. history. And ultimately, they tried to silence me. And, it's an example of corporate capture of government, corporate capture of our courts, which, as you know, is a huge issue now in our country. But that's what happened to me. But, we're keeping on going. And The communities in Ecuador have this great judgment, and they intend to enforce it against Chevron's assets and force Chevron to comply with it and clean up their ancestral lands. So, that's why I say I'm probably, at the time, I was a corporate political prisoner in the United States, detained by a corporation, by Chevron.
And that's a great segue. I do want to get to the environmental issues in America, but as we speak at the DNC in Chicago, there is, I believe, theater and pageantry going on. And the Democratic Party is basically crowing about the threat to democracy posed by Donald Trump. I do think there's validity to that. However, the messenger, it's hard to listen to the messenger because Attorney General Merrick Garland did not step in, even though there were Congress people who directly asked him to step in on your behalf to stop this corporate prosecution. There's a lot of other, questionable things going on in our democracy, namely corporations essentially running roughshod over private citizens, working class people, corporations poisoning communities like Flint, East Palestine. And you're not going to hear about any of that at the DNC this week. You're going to hear about the threat that Trump poses. Not to minimize Trump, but do you think our democratic system is thriving right now?
I don't. I mean, I think we have a very flawed liberal democracy that is, in a state of crisis right now, frankly. I mean, even for a liberal democracy. By liberal democracy, I mean there's elections every 4 years. There's no real worker participation in the making of economic policy. There's no real worker participation in making of really any policy at a meaningful level between elections. And elections are extremely limited because the choices are so limited. I mean, people might not know, or maybe your viewers or your listeners do know, but there's other viable candidates who are running or attempted to run for president. Among them, my friend Marianne Williamson, Jill Stein, Cornel West, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., no matter what you think of him, like he's run a campaign. They won't let any of these independent voices on the debate stage. The corporate media will not cover their policy positions for the most part. I mean, you'll hear a story about RFK leaving a dead bear in Central Park, but you won't hear about his critique of corporate capture of the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm not defending him, or I'm not endorsing any of these people. What I am pointing out is our democracy presents a really limited choice. Every 4 years, it kind of allows people to subjectively feel like they're participating. But it's really set up in advance such that, at least in terms of our economic policy, it's really hard to change anything. And, I would argue that our two-party system, it's not just the United States, you see this in the UK, the ability of the people to shape economic policy through voting, through the ballot box, has slowly been lost over the last several decades. I mean, we really turned over the making of economic policy from the people to institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, the Federal Reserve, or elected leaders in this country who are for the most part beholden to corporate interests because they depend on them for their campaign contributions. So while I don't take lightly the fact we do get to vote, I mean, I think it's important. I think people should vote, and I think people should participate. At the same time, it's important to recognize that the choices are very limited. In other countries, most European countries, for example, there's multi-party democracies. Their national legislatures can have 4, 5, 6, 7 parties. It forces them to form coalition governments, and it allows all sorts of voices to create innovative policy proposals to address, the things that afflict modern societies. We don't have that in the United States. So while people can get all excited about what they're going to see at the convention in Chicago, I would caution people to keep some perspective. The fundamental problems of this country, the over-incarceration, the extreme income inequality, poverty. I mean, there's 38 million people who live in poverty, and another tens of millions who live just above the poverty threshold, who are struggling to make ends meet. Generally, those issues are not going to be talked about in a meaningful way in Chicago. It really is presented as a sort of horse race, like a sports competition. And I fear Donald Trump. I mean, I don't want that man to be elected. I think he is a mortal threat to our liberal democracy. But I also think in the effort to keep him out of office, we cannot forget that we need more than what the Democratic Party is currently offering. I think we need a multi-party democracy where there can be meaningful participation by all sorts of sectors in the making of policy, not just a vote every 4 years with a very limited choice.
I've been going around the country now for almost a decade, covering what I do not think it's too dramatic to say is environmental genocide. I mean, I just published a book on the Flint water cover-up. It's 10 years now. 10 years. The water is still toxic and no one has been held criminally accountable. I was just in East Palestine, Ohio, right on the border between Ohio and Pennsylvania. I mean, in your case, it was Chevron. In this case, Norfolk Southern, a multi-billion-dollar railroad, unnecessarily detonated toxic chemicals over Ohio and Pennsylvania. Toxicologists I'm talking to say that plume spread to 8 states, including Canada. And I just interviewed a man with double breast cancer. I just interviewed a 35-year-old woman, lost her hair. I'm interviewing people who have dementia at 55. I interviewed 18-year-olds who are having seizures.
And it's just a good example. We're not making this up. I'm constantly worrying, like, there's something else wrong, or, it's just constantly, I'm sick, I barely eat. I have to force myself to eat. That's another thing, like, ever since this happened.
All were healthy before, from Flint to East Palestine, to other communities in America, water, air, soil. There is a real corporate, I would say, that the pattern is corporations, whether it's intentional or just, recklessness, are harming citizens. Yet one thing I agree with RFK on, there's corporate capture of our EPA, so many industries, and none of that is really talked about in either party. And now you have a Supreme Court that has just ruled that essentially agencies can't regulate. I mean, I think we're in dangerous territory beyond democracy with, if you're in the wrong community at the wrong time, you can be harmed and your health can be harmed. And there's very little recourse for that. Your thoughts?
Well, you make an excellent point. By the way, kudos to you for your great work as a journalist. It's interesting, though, isn't it? You're an independent journalist. You created your own news site. The major media outlets have now completely ignored the story that you just described in Ohio, the detonation by Norfolk Southern that has poisoned 8 states. They've almost completely ignored it now since about a few weeks after the actual incident. Like, you don't even hear about it other than people like yourself, okay? And, same thing with the Flint water crisis. I mean, your book outlines really one of the most egregious corporate and governmental scams in the modern history of the United States. No media coverage whatsoever. It's not going to be mentioned at the DNC. And the point of these 2 stories, which you've so, effectively covered, and which I followed your coverage very closely, is that there is massive corporate abuse of the average citizen in this country, whether it's Forever Chemicals by 3M, whether it's Norfolk Southern's train derailment. You're seeing this over and over again. And our EPA has been completely defanged. I mean, it's a very ineffective regulatory body. It doesn't even regulate most of the harmful, toxic, and carcinogenic chemicals that corporations are spewing into the environment. It doesn't even regulate them. And corporations pretty much have their way. And then when lawyers like myself file a plaintiff's lawsuit to try to, get compensation for the harm and provide at least some incentive for these corporations to refrain from engaging in future harm, we get attacked by this right-wing judicial system. In my case, I got actually detained for almost 3 years for winning a big case against Chevron for doing the same thing in Ecuador's Amazon. Many of the health problems you're describing, I've seen with my own eyes time and time again over many years in the Amazon jungle of Ecuador, where Chevron deliberately dumped billions of gallons of toxic waste. The issue of corporate capture of our government, the lack of regulation of corporations when they pollute, might be the single greatest threat to the well-being of our society. And there's a connection between that and the lack of democracy, isn't there? I mean, if we, the people, cannot have a meaningful voice beyond going to the ballot box for this very limited choice every 4 years, then it's going to be extremely difficult to rein in the power of these corporations. You mentioned the Supreme Court. I mean, people need to understand, and this again won't be talked about at the DNC. We have had a quiet judicial coup in this country over the last 3-4 years, and a whole series of cases where 6 ultra-conservative, deeply reactionary, unelected justices, 5 of whom were appointed by presidents who didn't even win the popular vote, by the way, are determining how the rest of us 330 million people in this country can live. Everything from reproductive freedom to whether our government will have the power to even regulate corporate behavior and to take the measures we need to save the planet from the climate crisis. And there's a whole host of
That was Stephen Donziger. That full interview, because that was just part of it, will air later this week. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you subscribe and support us. Statuscoup.com/join. $5 a month. That's all I'm asking. 16 cents a day, and you'll be able to watch the full interview. Same goes for a lot of the other guests we've had on yesterday and today. We have extended, longer interviews with them that we'll be making available to our paying members. So please, please support us. Just want to give a shout out. We've had some members sign up. Shout out to Tahira, signed up as a Status Coup member. Donald signed up as a Status Coup member. Tina, Kevin, and Andrew. So that's 5 so far while we've been live. We got to do better than that. Thank you to those who signed up. If we could get, 5 more, 10 more. This is grassroots independent media. Like I said, there's a lot of people constantly asking you for money. Most of them are sitting in a studio bloviating from their anus. We are on the ground. I am on the ground most of the time. Statuscoup.com/join. I want to also give a shout out to We and Goliath, who have really, if you notice, the production value is way, way better than normal here. It's because We and Goliath, award-winning digital event agency. They helped us out with this 3-day event. Hope we could work with them in the future too. They do great work. If you need help with digital events, hybrid events, which is digital and in person, definitely go to weandgoliath.com. Let's take a look a little bit more about them. It's so nice also to give a shout out to like actual companies that have values and try to do good in the world rather than like Amazon and Norfolk Southern and all the scum-sucking corporate vultures that advertise in the corporate media. Anyway, shout out to them. Thank you, Amzai, who's been producing behind the scenes for us. Thank you, Daniel, who helped set this up, and Jay, producer on this show, helped put us in touch with We and Goliath. I am super excited. As the Democratic Party puts on their theater inside the United Center, I have been delighted to be able to speak to Kshama Sawant. You might not know her. You definitely should get acquainted with her. She was a Seattle City Council member. Might seem insignificant. She was one of the few socialists elected, real socialists, not democratic socialism, socialist, capital S, elected in Seattle. And she, along with the activists that she worked with, she didn't go into Congress like some progressives and, say, oh, we have a strategy we'll tell you sometime about. No. She did not separate from activists. She brought her activism into the Seattle City Council, and she worked hand in hand with activists outside to win major historic accomplishments. That's why Seattle was the first city with the $15 minimum wage, because the people like Kshama Sawant, she has been very, very, very critical of the Democratic Party, and she advocates for a third party. I spoke with her a little earlier about the DNC, the Democratic Convention, third parties, and more. Let's take a look. Hey, it's Jordan. Happy to be joined by Kshama Sawant, former Seattle City Council member, proud socialist, and now is with Workers Strike Back. You're actually there in Chicago. And I wanted to first ask you because on Monday night, it was unsurprisingly, the theater inside of the DNC did not match the reality outside. There was one mention of protests outside by President Biden. And I'm sure you've seen that protesters who protested during Biden's speech were quickly removed. Somebody tried to yank their sign that said "Stop Funding Israel," and the DNC even dimmed the lights over them. Can you kind of describe? It really seems like it's an alternate reality inside versus outside.
I think that's a good way of describing this, sort of an alternate reality playing out, as you said, in a theater inside the DNC, which is completely divorced from the reality, not only of the protests in Chicago, but the reality of the vast majority of American working people who are both against the genocidal war on Gaza and are demanding an immediate permanent ceasefire, and the reality, the grotesque reality facing the Palestinian people, where they are being subjected to just unspeakable horrors. And it is quite something to observe how it's been already, it was just one day of the Democratic National Convention, and already that first day featured a who's who of Democratic Party elite who made their predictable speeches. But I think what stood out, especially in the theater from yesterday at the first day of DNC, was the speeches of UAW President Shawn Fain and squad member AOC, and just to see how far they are going to give cover to the Democratic establishment, especially in the context of unions, including UAW, having passed ceasefire resolutions.
Yeah, I make no secret that I covered the UAW strikes. I thought they accomplished a great deal. I could even understand possibly the endorsement of Biden, but the lengths that Fain and the UAW are going to support him, it does not match what Biden has done for labor.
No, absolutely not. And it was stunning to me. I mean, myself as a socialist, as a former rank and file member of the teachers union, to see how, and as somebody who was, a working class representative in Seattle for 10 years, to see Shawn Fain use the language of the labor movement, of the militant labor movement, in service of this clearly anti-worker and pro-war, not only the administration, but the Harris-Walz candidacy. Because, Shawn Fain said that he's in exhorting people to support the Harris candidacy. He said, "Whose side are you on?" I mean, that's just shocking for me, because whose side are you on means, are you on the side of the working class or on the side of the bosses, the capitalists who exploit billions of workers? So to use this language, to co-opt this language in such a dramatically dishonest manner in service of both a candidacy and a party that serves the interests of the billionaire class, I really think we have to call this out.
Yeah. I want to ask you broader, because I think you, for those that don't know you, because we have new viewers watching tonight, you, I think, have accomplished more than any progressive in America, actually elected. You, along with socialists and community activists in Seattle, won the $15 minimum wage. Squad members, progressives elected, they present that they've won some things, but not the things they ran on. And what I really want to ask you is, what is the road forward, and how does the left achieve concrete structural change? Because there are some saying, hold your nose, let's defeat Trump, and then we'll fight Kamala Harris. Well, they said they would fight Joe Biden. That didn't happen. There are others saying third party is the only way. But you've actually achieved success and won concrete policies as an elected official. So can you give us the roadmap? How do we do that on the local level, whatever the label, progressive, socialist, doesn't matter. because I know I am tired of covering progressive candidates that once they get in, they might share our values, but they certainly do not seem to have a strategy to win anything.
Yes, you're totally right. I've also seen this as just a procession of self-described progressives or left Democrats or even socialists, actually, since Bernie Sanders ran his first campaign in 2016 for president as an open socialist. We've seen these candidates, and let's assume many of them are well-meaning to begin with, which I do believe many of them are, but when they get into office, when they acquire these positions where they are put under intense pressure from the establishment, from the big business establishment, I mean, the big business entities that actually control the Democratic and Republican parties, then they crumble. And the way they do it is by justifying to themselves, rationalizing to themselves that I'm actually still on the left. I'm just being pragmatic. This is the sort of rationalizing you see AOC having done. She talked about how, well, I want to win 15. I want to win Medicare for all. But this is the way you do it, because if you defy the Democratic establishment, to use her own words, you cause relational harm. And so I want to clarify, though, that this type of pressure is always present. It is relentless. It never goes away. So I think for viewers who are watching this, I think we have to be 100% clear. There is no universe where we can have ourselves become, acquire leadership positions or promote others as into these leadership positions and expect that somehow magically there's going to be some space somewhere, sometime, at some point in the future where our people who are in leadership positions will not face those pressures. That pressure is always going to be there, because that is the way in which capitalism addresses any kind of challenge to itself. That is the way in which the bosses, the billionaires, the people who hold the power under this capitalist system are going to make sure that any challenge to their system is diffused by, and the best way they can diffuse these challenges, really the most effective way for them, is to just buy out, to have people sell out. And it's not always in the form of millions of dollars, like, challenge to itself. That is the way in which the bosses, the billionaires, the people who hold the power under this capitalist system are going to make sure that any challenge to their system is diffused by, and the best way they can diffuse these challenges, really the most effective way for them, is to just buy out, to have people sell out. And it's not always in the form of millions of dollars. Like, AOC has not acquired millions of dollars in return for selling out. But what you see happening is that if you want to stand up to these pressures, then what happens is that the Democratic Party elite, the big business entities, like Jeff Bezos, all these billionaires, they will make your daily life a living hell. And if you don't understand that that is what you have to sign up for, in other words, you have to withstand those challenges. And the only way you can withstand those challenges, those pressures, is by using your office to build wider movements. And that is exactly why we won the first minimum $15 minimum wage in the nation. We won the Amazon tax. We won unprecedented renters' rights. And actually, if you look at the statistics, if you add up all the victories that we won in Seattle through our socialist fighting, worker organizing approach through our office, we have actually won billions of dollars for working people. We have, if you count up all the $15 victories that were won after Seattle because they were inspired by our victory, millions of workers have been raised to $15 an hour. And in cities like Seattle, actually the wages are $20 an hour. And they are far from enough, but these are the only victories. I'll just tell you, when when we won the $15 minimum wage in 2014, this is now 10 years ago, many journalists asked me, 10 years from now or 15 years from now, how would you measure your success? And my response to them always was that if 10 years from now, we are still talking about our Seattle victories as the only victories that have been achieved, that will be a statement on the left that we are actually not seeing the strategies being used on the left that need to be used. And that's why it is true, unfortunately for us, as you correctly said, that the example we set in Seattle is the only example. And that's why I urge people to join Workers' Strike Back, because the reason we founded Workers' Strike Back was to take these ideas that have been shown to be so successful, to take them nationally.
And it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, the main thing you did that separates you from, frankly, Obama, who he had a digital army. I mean, he had an organizing army. Obviously, he did not mean the things he ran on, but he had the infrastructure and then left them on the White House lawn. Bernie, you could say. I mean, he had his Slack channel was bigger than DSA. And after his 2 runs, he kind of did not utilize his massive activist army to put pressure. Or it seems that you didn't just get elected and then say, all right, I'll let you know how it goes to the people who got you elected. They were one with you and you worked together. And that's what we're not currently seeing.
Yes, that is what you described is basically, in a nutshell, what we mean when we say a fighting strategy. A fighting strategy means, first of all, that you understand as a leader, whether you're elected or you emerge as a leader of a social movement like Black Lives Matter or the anti-war movement, you understand that your role there is not to carry out a so-called compromise. And I say so-called because it's never a compromise, it's a capitulation. Your role is not to negotiate some kind of peace where actually working people and the anti-war movement get completely screwed and you hand victories to the Democratic elite on a platter. No, your role there is to disrupt politics as usual. Your role there is to organize a fight back. And I agree with the terminology used that you have to organize the army of the working class, because this is class war. And if we don't organize a fight back of working people by mobilizing and organizing the rank and file of both the labor movement and workers who are not unionized, there is absolutely no path.
Thank you, Kshama Sawant. That's probably like a half of our interview. The full interview will be up for paying members. So sign up, statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month. That's 16 cents a day. And while we were in that, thank you. Shout out to Daniel, just signed up. Carrie just signed up. So Carrie, Daniel, Andrew, Kevin, Tina, Donald, Tahira, thank you for signing up. I honestly, genuinely, you get a lot of emails. You get a lot of emails from politicians begging you for money with a lot of bullshit and marketing. You get a lot of emails, text messages from different organizations begging you for money. Some of them are good, and if you have the money, give to them. All I'm asking, actions speak louder than words. Our actions, we walk the walk. We have been all around this country. I have been all over this country. I would be at the DNC in Chicago now if I had actual childcare. I don't. Well, I do, but not for the long story short. I don't have childcare at the moment. So please, please, please support us, because it is so important. It's one thing to give your opinion and do commentary and hot takes on the internet, and plenty of progressives give unique commentary. It's another thing to get out there and connect with the people. Be the people's mic. That's why we called this the people's mic. Be the people's mic out on the front lines, covering protests. We've also done economic reporting tours during the pandemic. We've gone out and interviewed homeless people. We've gone out and interviewed impoverished people. We've gone out and interviewed workers, union organizers, the stuff you will never, ever see on CNN. You will not see on MSNBC, Fox News, the New York Times, the Washington Post. They're too busy treating politics like it's a sport. So if you can, I beg of you, please, please support us. Statuscoup.com/join, $5 a month. And as a member, by the way, if you don't know, we do a monthly members call. So you could join us through that, through a program like Zoom. So we have a lot of fun with that. We provide behind the scenes content when we're on the road for our paying members. And definitely tell your friends too. I mean, they don't have to be progressive or lefties. We actually have some right wingers in our audience that don't agree with me on everything, but really respect that we cover stories like Flint, cover environmental genocide, corporate corruption, the fact that we're not like wearing Team Blue hats, but we call out all politicians and all sides. So please, please support us. Statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month. A quick promo to show you more about our work. and then I'll preview our interview with Jill Stein coming up next.
And, you know, it's a sad, twisted irony when a person like Farley wants to talk about what we do and don't deserve when the man's making $20-some million a year and keeps bumping his pay up. You know, he gets a 40% pay increase and tries to justify that, and it's on the backs of these people that he's getting it.
Oh, because I can't stand greedy bosses. I can't stand profit-obsessed owners that treat workers as if they're less than human. I salute Brother Sean, his leadership.
Yeah, wage slavery. I mean, how can someone work 6 hours, 6 days, 10 hours a week, or 10 hours a day, and still not be able to afford? We can't even afford a cat if we wanted a cat.
And we need a good pay for our families. It's been tough for you. Because you must be struggling right now with bills. Make the bed? Anyways. Yep. But it's division.
That was from our on-the-ground coverage on the picket lines covering the UAW strike. We were on the ground for 3 straight weeks. You might not know this. It's very fucking expensive for an independent outlet to be on the ground for 3 straight days, let alone 3 straight weeks. We covered the UAW strike in Michigan, in Ohio, in Illinois. Hell, I went to Canada. Because we were expecting a strike there too. Didn't happen, but I still crossed the border. So please, again, support us. statuscoup.com/join and share this broadcast. Tell your friends about our show tonight, our show the night before. If you don't spread the word, if we don't spread the word, nobody will. Because I got news for you. The stuff we're covering here ain't going to be on CNN, ain't going to be on Fox News, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, Associated Press, Daily Beast, Mother Jones, all the rest. Please support us. And some might say, Jordan, stop begging for money. Well, I wish I was the Federal Reserve and had a money tree in my backyard. I don't. So if I don't ask you, I'd rather beg you, the people, for funding to do more of this than ever beg the remaining Koch brother or the Walton family or Norfolk Southern or the rest of the corporate criminals tanking this country. And before we go on to our last interview for the night, I want to remind you, today, my book, We the Poisoned, has been out for 2 weeks now. We the Poison, Exposing the Flint Water Cover-Up. It's based on 8 years of my reporting. I went to Flint, thanks to you guys and gals, 21 times. I took 21 reporting trips to Flint. It's the only way I would have been able to get the information to expose what I believe, and this book exposes, is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century. To be clear, the scandal revealed in my book makes Watergate, which all the, old fogies, even though we love our old fogies who watch, it makes all the old fogies' favorite, Watergate, look like child's play. Watergate was just a bunch of knuckleheads breaking into an office. If the president wasn't involved, nobody would give a shit. This is the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century that is actively still killing people. So please check out my book. You could order it online, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It's in bookstores as well. We the Poison, Exposing the Flint Water Cover-Up. I've gotten a lot of great feedback on it, a lot of great reviews, and we're trying to push forward. Not easy to get attention on a book about the Flint Water Cover-Up during an election year, I'll tell you that, but we're trying our best. So please get the book. Thousands of copies have been sold already, but I'm hoping and praying we could get more. It's not about making money. I'm not going to become a bestseller or a millionaire from this. It's about getting the truth out, because we cannot normalize the poisoning of Americans and then the government covering it up and leaving them to die. All right. Before we bid adieu, we have one last interview. We're going to play part of my interview with Jill Stein, the Green Party nominee. Obviously, the media has condemned her. Obviously, they have claimed she was the spoiler that cost Hillary the election. They're already setting the groundwork to blame her if Kamala Harris loses. So I talked to her about that, a lot of other things, including the genocide going on in Gaza. We will play a clip of Michael Moore and Ralph Nader, and then my interview with Jill Stein.
Obviously, we are not convincing you with any of our words, so I'm just going to say, because of all your great service, and because we do really love you, but we disagree with you on this, Michael and I are going to get down on our knees and beg you not to run. Please. Ralph, run for president. Because you're a great American. Don't run. Please.
Don't do this.
Please.
Don't do this, Ralph. Come home, Ralph.
Come on. We're on our knees.
We're on our knees. Come home.
Fight these Republicans. Fight these Republicans.
Hey there. Delighted to be joined by Dr. Jill Stein, 2024 Green Party nominee for the presidency, has been in Chicago at the DNC, even though she's surely not welcome inside the building. And you have been a candidate in 2016 as well. There's a lot to get to, and I know you're busy. I want to start with kind of a compare and contrast clips. This was a clip, I believe, on CNN the other day, again, bringing you up.
I do want to say that everybody in here, regardless of whether or not we're in the DNC bubble or what may have you, I want people to realize that Jill Stein's a real threat. And we cannot, don't laugh at that. That's a real thing. I want you to know that many people were up late at night. I actually have my daughter, who is now a sophomore at Howard University. We were there, and I remember that Hillary Clinton called me the night before and asked me to join her at the Javits Center with the glass ceiling, and I didn't do it because I was on CNN. We were going to shatter the glass and all those things, but we did not know that we would lose by 100,000 votes, and Jill Stein would have more votes than we lost for. I say all of that to say, Democrats, this ain't over yet. It's 70-plus days left. You got to run till the wheels fall off.
So that was the clip number one. They're saying you're the threat, I guess, to victory, to democracy, et cetera, et cetera. And then I want to play some of our on-the-ground coverage from last night. And it is quite different than what he was talking about. This is a little bit of our coverage from last night, which showed police brutally beating pro-Palestinian protesters. Let's take a look.
You guys are going to lose your media passes if you don't go to the park.
And then there is the tasing that went on. Let me show you that.
Move back. Move back. Get out. Back up. Move back. Back up. Move back. Move back. Move back. Move back.
So obviously, you could see CNN Democratic operatives are saying you're the threat. I would say to victory, it's probably threatening if you're terrorizing the young voters that you desperately need to vote for you and using the police to basically beat the hell out of freedom of speech.
Yeah, I mean, the police presence here is absolutely overwhelming. And it's not just police, it's helicopters, it is Army transport vehicles. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying. Walking with the Poor People's Army yesterday, the streets were just absolutely lined with police. And at one point when we approached the convention center, or, you know, we came within visual distance of the convention center, still separated by a substantial field. the police all put down their hoods. And, having been through this before, it looked like they were, preparing to attack. They did not. And the group at that point, the Poor People's Army March, circled up and, basically sang. There were some musicians along, and it was all very peaceful. We were chanting. We had to be in single file, the whole time, and the police were largely, peaceful. They kept their distance until the end, when they were just, I don't know where they came from, but they were there in enormous numbers, and there was just a wall of cops, many layers thick, and they all had their hoods down. So, I mean, it looked to me like, if you have asthma, if you have lung issues, get ready to run for your life, that they were, looked like they were preparing to attack, and is extremely intimidating, and has been really across the board. And we know now that we are dealing with police who have been trained, for the most part, across the country by the Israeli occupation forces in these so-called security exchange programs now, where you have the Israeli, brutal cops training U.S. police in their tactics for murderously policing Palestinians, that these tactics and strategies are now the norm here, at the same time that the 1033 program brings tasers and drones and armored vehicles into our local police forces. And, this is what an empire looks like at home. There is a war on people of color across the world, on indigenous people in Palestine, and there is a war on working people and a war on democracy going on right here. And that was just evident throughout the convention and the protests. It's a really sad commentary on the political system here, and in particular here at this protest. And it was similar, in Milwaukee 2 months ago. It was the same thing at the RNC, at the DNC. These are bastions of our economic and political elite, and they are completely militarized. They do not represent us. We cannot be seen. We cannot be heard. With the Poor People's Army, who had walked basically from Milwaukee over a period of almost 2 weeks, had covered almost 2 miles. And then they were greeted by several aldermen from Chicago who told them that they were not welcome here and that they would not be able to sleep in the park. And then the route that the Poor People's Army had a permit for, which would bring us within sight of the DNC, that was then revised so that we were not able to really get within sight. That's the whole purpose of the right to protest, the right of free speech. Specifically, the right of protest is for redress of grievances. You need to be able to protest against those who are abusing power, and to have kept us a distance and tried to minimize any visibility by the people at the convention of everyday, ordinary Americans, poor Americans, homeless Americans, to have essentially silenced us and disappeared us is just, it's a violation of our basic, civil rights, our civil liberties, the Bill of Rights, our First Amendment rights. And it is just emblematic of how working people are being thrown under the bus by the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party.
And I should also note, we could show this clip too. There was a protest on the first night of the DNC where delegates in the Florida section, while President Biden was speaking, put up a sign to stop funding Israel. And the DNC basically tried to just hide it. People were trying to pull the signs from them, and they dimmed the lights. So that's kind of the alternate reality going on here. 1968, they did not have social media to be able to show those things. Now we do. That's a segue to my next question. I want to get back to this narrative because I think they're already trying to set it up in the event that Vice President Harris loses loses to blame you. But for those that don't know, credit to Vox of all places. Vox actually told the facts that you were not the deciding factor in Hillary Clinton losing in 2016. I'll just read this quick. Time to blame those idealistic third-party voters? Not quite. Obviously, not all Stein and Johnson voters, Gary Johnson voters, were disaffected Democrats. Some would have voted for Trump. Written-in candidates are not voted at all. This is very different from Florida in 2000, where only a small fraction of Florida voters for Nader, about 0.5%, would have needed to vote Gore to give Gore the election. And that's what exit polling that asked how people would have voted in a two-party race with the third option of not voting finds. Under the scenario, Hillary Clinton would have won Michigan, still lost Florida, and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania would have been a 48 to 48% toss-up. Clinton would have needed to win both of those states to reach 270 electoral votes. So even in the artificial world of that exit poll that erased Stein and Johnson, Clinton seemed likely to lose. I do not say that to win your favor. I say that because I think it's a kind of a dangerous game when the Democrats repeatedly, and Republicans also, try to make excuses beforehand. We know Trump with the election fraud and all that nonsense. But at the end of the day, you were not why she lost in 2016. And right now, it seems to me, if she loses, look in the streets of Chicago, look in the streets of New York, in DC, all over the country, and what's going on with young people, older people joining them. It seems to me this is our Vietnam. Gaza, to a different degree, is why potentially those young voters, other voters, are not going to come out if she does not change policy.
Absolutely. Remember that in 2020, 1 out of every 3 eligible voters decided not to vote. You can add to the, this horrific war, this genocide, which is basically being conducted by the United States government, by the Biden-Harris government, with Israel as its proxy. I mean, we are the providing the weapons, the financing, the diplomatic cover, the intelligence. This is our war, and it is horrific in overwhelming numbers. 68%, according to a Reuters poll, of the American public wants this war immediately shut down and a diplomatic solution. So there is that. The fact of the brutal arm of repression in our campuses, with police, again, trained by the Israeli occupation forces for the most part, brutalizing protesters. So you have all of that. And whether those people will sit this out or whether they will vote for our campaign, they deserve to do so. So, the Democrats are trying to blame the democratic small d democracy, the system of having political choices. They're blaming that on us who provide those political choices. That's absurd. They need to blame themselves for what they have done to have alienated so many blocks of voters. And if you look at the biggest loss that the Democrats ever had, their most so-called spoiled election ever, it was the midterms of 2010. There was no major third-party force there. I don't know that there were any third-party candidates in the 2010 midterms, where the Democrats lost 1,000 seats in state legislatures. They lost 64 seats in Congress. They lost some 13 seats in the Senate and the same number of governorships. The Democrats are being punished for having betrayed their voters, for having thrown working people under the bus, for NAFTA, going back to the Clintons, for the Wall Street bailouts. Which is when, they had their big loss in 2010. That was basically the shellacking that Obama talked about, because the Democratic trifecta had betrayed working people and homeowners, had thrown them out of their homes by the millions while they bailed out Wall Street banks in the order of trillions. So they've brought this upon themselves. And I think their very pathetic excuses really fall on deaf ears. They've used them for so long. The mainstream media may all be a chorus now in tune with the Democrats here, but you're probably aware of the fact that polls show that the American people, a majority of the American people, understand that mainstream media is largely attempting to mislead them, and one cannot believe what the mainstream media says. So they will conjure up some reason to blame their political opponents. And I'm honored that I am considered their political opponent, that they should consider me opposition, because they are basically the opponent of the American people, throwing working people under the bus. And for me to be seen as the opponent to the trashing of the American people, I think is an incredible badge of honor.
And, last night I interviewed folks who, are still kind of working within the Democratic Party, asked them some tough questions. So I want to ask you a tough question or two. On a broader scale, because tonight we're really focused on third parties, how to actually win with third parties' independence. Something that's always struck me, to me, it was never really exclusively about, working, trying to win progressive change within the Democratic Party versus third party. Because to me, those are two forks in the roads, but I saw dead ends at either end. And the reason I saw that is they're going to rig it either way. The system is rigged. So they rig it within the Democratic Party, but we're also seeing on your run right now, you could explain, the Democratic Party is challenging in Wisconsin. The FEC, I believe, is not giving you matching funds that you have earned. The Democratic Party has challenged you in other states. The Democratic Party in Michigan just threw Cornel West off the ballot. I mean, I could go down the list. He's not my cup of tea, but RFK as an independent, they've challenged him. So to build a third party, it's not exactly an easier path than trying to win through the Democratic Party. So to you, what is your message to people? How do you build? Green Party exists, so it already exists, but you got to build it up more. How do you challenge those army of lawyers? How do you challenge a media blackout? How do you actually build this to win and get around that rigging?
Yeah, so let me say the critical difference between fighting within the Democratic Party and outside of the Democratic Party is that you don't get completely torn down and then have to start from zero after the election, which is what happened to the Bernie Sanders campaign. It was a great campaign, but what did he get out of it? He got basically the chairmanship of the budget committee, and his good ideas basically went to die, in that committee. And there was no movement to continue building. That is the benefit of a third party. It is very hard to build a third party, but to the credit of the Greens, they have not been destroyed. The average lifespan of a non-corporate third party in this country is somewhere around 10 years. You can look at Rocky Anderson, for example, who founded the Justice Party back in 2012 in the first race where I ran for president. That was 2012. And Rocky Anderson, who had been a Democratic mayor of Salt Lake City, who had a huge reputation and a substantial base as a very progressive guy, he was going to found a new party, which lasted for exactly 2 cycles and then it petered out. It takes enormous work and a base and real commitment and perseverance. And all the knives and daggers will be out to destroy you. And that includes the smear campaigns, the fear campaigns, ballot access, which is made more difficult all the time. It's an impossible, I wouldn't say impossible, but it is extremely difficult row to hoe for starters, and they just make it more difficult all the time. Being locked out and blocked out of mainstream media coverage, and most so-called progressive media like Democracy Now! Has not had us on a single time. They've been willing to cover Cornel West, who has a powerful and beautiful message, but he does not represent a movement that shows that it has real staying power. We have been under attack now for 20 years, and we continue to grow stronger. In the last election that I was in, we tripled our vote from the prior election. So the point is to continue to fight. And I must say, after 2016, we were really sabotaged by the attack of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which basically took me out of commission for 3 years in order to fight that battle. It also robbed our financial resources in order to pay the lawyers that we needed in order to fight that battle on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where basically they were trying to accused me of being a Russian asset, as Hillary Clinton herself had exclaimed, as part of the Russiagate failed conspiracy theory, basically, that eventually came to light. All of its tenets were effectively disproven. This was another, effort of the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party to explain their loss to a reality TV clown, whose campaign they had actually helped launch, by helping to bring him their so-called Pied Piper theory and so on. So, the strategies of the Democratic Party here had effectively neutralized us after the election for some time. But recently, they not only hired this army of lawyers to throw us off the ballot, they also publicly advertised for paid positions to manage infiltrators and spies, which was like proof of what we have been suspecting for a long time, which is that they do infiltrate, third parties, people's movements, anti-war, anti-racism, et cetera. They are there in the ranks, attempting to sow conflict, the Black Panthers, you name it. They have all kinds of ways of trying to disrupt, and that certainly includes disrupting within the Green Party. So I think we've kind of been alerted now, and we're more prepared to deal with the many strategies that the Democrats use to try to disrupt us. That's not to say it's going to be easier going forward, but that much of our momentum in 2016 did get sabotaged by that Senate Intelligence Committee. I think we're in a better position now to be able to respond to the many forms of sabotage that are coming from the Democrats right now, and to be public about that, and to be calling them out, and to be mobilizing our ranks to be able to deal with that. That's just part of being an open, decentralized, small d democratic political party. You are going to be interfered with and messed with. We now understand that in a way that we didn't, I think, in 2016. So to your question, how is it different running outside rather than inside? Well, outside, we can tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We don't have to worry about retribution from the Democratic Party. We don't have to worry about our funding being cut off by the likes of Nancy Pelosi or her, or Chuck Schumer. The heads of the party will have enormous control over the funding that comes to you. So we are actually free to tell the truth. We are free to mobilize, and we're free to keep building, which is what we are doing now in a big way. I think I have to add, I think we are in a moment of the bubble. We are seeing the Kamala Walz honeymoon kind of at its peak right now, with peak Democratic Party public relations campaign. The propaganda machine is really cranking away right now. I think that did a lot to diminish the turnout, that and the fear of the police presence here.
So that was Dr. Jill Stein. The full interview should be up in a few days. That was about half of the interview. So definitely support us if you can. Statuscoup.com/join. Become a member for as low as $5 a month. If you're already a member but want to support us in other ways, you could also donate. That's statuscoup.com/donate. We appreciate all of them, from $5 to, we've even had some amazing folks leave $500. We've had folks leave $1,000 if I've been on the road to support us. So thank you for everybody who signed up today. We definitely want to grow even more this week. I think we've reached about 30 to 40 new members. Our goal is for 100. So hopefully we can pick it up over the next few days. If you could sign up, again, it is to support us for on-the-ground reporting. It is to support us for investigative reporting, so we can keep going out and covering the stories that the corporate media abandons. Corporate media abandons stories like Flint, East Palestine. They don't cover in the first place worker exploitation. So it's so important that we are funded so we can stay out there and keep on these important stories. Also, tomorrow, big show, same time, 6 o'clock Eastern. We're going to have Cornel West on, Dr. Richard Wolff. We're also economist and professor. Also going to have a little comedic relief. I think we need it after this week and the bullshit theater going on at the DNC. We'll have comedians Ron Placone, Helen Hong, who's a comedian. She was also on HBO's Silicon Valley. We're going to have Greg Palast, investigative journalist, does great work on all the right-wing voter suppression tactics. We're also going to have Jennifer Flynn Walker. She's with the Center for Popular Democracy. And Peter Hager will drop in. If you know Peter, it does occasionally his alter ego is Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton. So tomorrow should be a lot of fun. Really looking forward to Cornel West's interview because, as I broke earlier today, the Democratic Party has been sending out its hyenas this week to try and pressure Cornel West to drop out of the campaign, even dangling an administration job with Kamala Harris's administration if he'll drop out. And I hear from a couple sources, even dangling potential financial incentives. Would you look at that? We will be asking Dr. West about those things. I am happy to say he told them to go kick rocks, and that in his quotes, you're talking to the wrong brother. So some of you don't want him to run. Some of you want him to run. That's for you to decide. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but important, from Nina Turner this week, we spoke with Marianne Williamson, Jill Stein, Kshama Sawant, and Cornel West. And by the way, it ain't easy. It ain't easy to schedule all these interviews, but we should be able to get Cornel tomorrow. Again, thank you so much for your support. Thank you to Amzai with We and Goliath, has been directing, producing behind the scenes. Thank you to Jay, who's been producing behind the scenes, helping us set up this 3-day show with guests and ideas and video elements. He's been a great producer. Colin, as always, behind the scenes. Thank you to those who signed up and spread this stream. Share these live streams. Share it to your friends. Share it to your families. I don't care if they're left, right, libertarian, politically agnostic. I bet you the response will be, why isn't the mainstream media covering half the shit that was on these shows? We don't hear about this stuff. Environmental genocide, indigenous rights, corporate corruption. That's not what we're hearing at the DNC. That's not what we hear at the RNC. So definitely share these streams. Definitely check out our live streams and videos from earlier today, from last night. John has been doing amazing work on the ground for us. So definitely check out those videos, share those. And again, I will ask till I'm blue in the face. There's got to be something you spend $5 on a month that you might not necessarily need. $5 a month, 16 cents a day. Support statuscoup.com/join. statuscoup.com/join. It's all I'm asking, 16 cents a day, $5 a month. We will end this stream with some of our on-the-ground reporting from the last few days, thanks to John Farina on the ground. And you also, we never know when we're gonna be live because we don't know always when shit's gonna explode on the streets. So definitely be following us on Twitter. Our Substack is free, statuscoup.substack.com. Here's to go out for the night, some of our on-the-ground reporting.
When you sleep at night thinking about it, that your tax dollar are responsible of killing innocent children just because AIPAC controlled this country? We have good candidates, moral candidates. Wake up, America. Wake up.
We are human beings, and one human being cannot see the suffering of another human being, especially the women and children who are getting buried alive. It has nothing to do with the Democrat or Republican.
They also burned another family while they are sleeping, and the whole family died burning. This is in West Bank, by the way, years ago, and only one survived kid. His name is Muhammad that survived that. And it's protected by the Israeli terrorist forces. I call them ITF, not IDF.
Press, you gotta leave the area where you're set to press. You guys are gonna lose your media passes if you don't go to the park. Right here. Leave her alone! Come on, let's go.
go.